pause to remember the 5th of November in Portland after Occupy Portland took on the rulers' uniformed thugs on the 3rd of November. Running battles on the streets saw the usual thrown at the 99ers: pepper spray, police baton charges, beatings, and arrests. In New York, Occupy Sandy Relief, organized by Occupy Wall Street, got there to offer short-term assistance to people hardest hit by the devastation in the wake of Storm Sandy. Over in D.C., veterans on their 4th week of occupation of the VA marched to the White House, and the Black is Back rally held at Malcolm X Park condemned the hypocritical role of U.S. imperialism, as well as indefinite detention, drone attacks, aggressive military occupations, and torture. Los Angeles was relatively quiet other than 2 actions, one against Deutsche Bank headquarters and the German consulate to protest the European banking giant's violation of a federal court order to allow the Lucero family to remain in their home, and the Fort Hernandez solidarity action for cancer victim Niko Black, who has been removed from her home due to fraudulent foreclosure by Wells Fargo. Ain't no stopping us now. Occupy Wall Street in New York City had several events planned for the final week of October, but those plans were undone when a hurricane named Sandy hit the city October 29th with devastating storm surges and wind. By that night, Occupy Sandy Relief NYC had an Inter-Occupy Hub website and a Facebook page. Within a week, Occupy Wall Street had become a leader in local hurricane relief efforts, working with environmental and community groups such as Goals, a Lower East Side housing and preservation organization, to bring help to people who need it. As one occupier put it, this is what we do already: build community, help neighbors, and create a world without the help of finance. Over in Los Angeles and Van Nuys, California, occupiers continued to man the barricades at Fort Lucero and Fort Hernandez, taking time away from these foreclosure protections to mount street actions on November 2nd against Deutsche Bank to highlight its violation of a U.S. federal court-ordered stay of eviction in the Lucero case. November 3rd saw a solidarity action for cancer victim Niko Black, held by the Hernandez family and Occupy supporters. She has been removed from her home by Wells Fargo, so protesters marched to shut down that bank, throwing in Bank of America and Citibank for good measure. On November 2nd, veterans and Occupy allies in Washington, D.C. took a break from their 4-week-long occupation of the VA and peace vigils to hold a march to the White House in an effort to educate citizens and make their voices heard, detailing their experiences and illuminating the human cost of endless warfare. Their commander-in-chief was not available, out on the campaign trail emphasizing his tough approach on foreign policy, apparently oblivious to the hardships faced by the men and women who serve the war machine he perpetuates.
How you been?
Good, man. How about you?
Go down this way. Go down what they call
No, this year we won't be able to.
Did you ever hear of a
My name's Barry. I served 118th MP Company Airborne, Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I am not a combat veteran. Thank God. Today we have quite a few combat veterans. As a matter of fact, we have another 10,000 every single month entering the system. Of those 10,000, 30% of them have PTSD. So far, there's been 250,000 soldiers diagnosed with PTSD. 100,000 of them haven't received any treatment or benefits for it. And with an additional 10,000 troops entering the system every single month, 30% of whom have PTSD, they are overwhelmed. Their money, their resources are not available. My question is, if we can write blank checks to defense contractors to build the bullets and the tanks and the bombs and the drones, then we damn well be able to find the money and the resources to take care of the very people we send over there to do their fighting. It's absolutely absurd the way these veterans are being treated coming home.
Portland, Oregon occupiers, labor groups, and community activists turned out en masse on November 3rd for a rally and march against austerity measures.
Can you just state your name for me and tell me a little bit about your drone education over drones?
I'll do the very best I can. My name is Mark Hubble. I'm a representative of Right to Dream 2, which is the rest area of 4th and Burnside, and we support the Portland Action Lab and this demonstration today to show the city and the nation austerity ain't cutting it no more. All right? Too many billions are being spent needlessly on warfare, military budget, when they could be used at home here to help those that really need it. And that goes across the board. Seniors, school, our kids coming up. So enough is enough.
Declaring enough is enough, approximately 1,000 protesters hit the Portland streets, using the First Amendment as their permit and taking a stand against austerity cuts. The protest was staged prior to the presidential election to point out that public deficits on city, state, and federal levels are being addressed by cuts-only budgets, wherein education, healthcare, transportation, and other vital public services are defunded and public sector workers are attacked, and that austerity cuts will be made no matter the winner on Tuesday, November 6th.
I'm a teacher in a public school, and what's going on in Oregon right now is a lot of kids are moving to charter schools that are being funded by the taxpayers, and then the money is basically the same amount going to these charter schools that are organized by places like K-12 Inc. that are then taking that money, providing a not very good education for really cheap, and then pocketing the remainder of the money and using it to lobby essentially a congressman. So I'm out here to support traditional education and brick and mortar schools with real licensed teachers working with the kids.
Portland acted in solidarity with an International Day of Action against austerity. Peaceful protesters were met by police officers intent on denying First Amendment rights and preventing them from entering a certain street. Police corralled the marchers with horse and bike so that riot police could pepper spray and assault them. A 16-year-old youth and Cameron Whitten, a mayoral candidate and Portland occupier, were hit with chemical agents. Arrests were made, but the marchers continued back to Holiday Park to celebrate by the light of burning election ballots.
You feel me? When I say liberation is, I want you to say right here. You feel me? When I say people power is, I want you to say right here. All right? Revolution is. Right here. Liberation is. Right here. People power is. Right here. Every city, every hood, every block, everywhere. Liberation is. Right here. Revolution is. Right here. People power is. Right here. Every city, every hood, every block, everywhere.
The people have made it clear that they no longer believe in the top-down system of elected government, which has failed them by allowing corporations to control the system, hoard wealth, privatize community resources, and burden 99ers with enormous debt.
After that event, they went off to do the poster.
What is it about? Well, it's the opposite of the austerity project, because what we're doing is presenting budgeting processes and budgeting recommendations locally for what the kind of budget we'd have if there weren't corporate tax breaks, if everything wasn't leaning towards the large corporations. So we're creating an alternative. It's kind of a movement in the world, participatory budgeting. So you actually try to seize the budget ultimately and decide as a community what you want to budget for, whether it's schools or roads or, well, not weather, but...
Let the entities which created the crisis pay for it. The 99% power is in the neighborhoods, building alternatives, and taking the streets. No matter who is elected, the people are creating communities to make their own decisions and control their own resources.
100 vacant routes in the city of Portland. We need to bring people on, but they're starving us with jobs, and they've been taking our money. Congress, since 2006, has been stealing, and I repeat, taking from the Postal Service that's been off the budget since 1982, not a tax dollar used since 1982 for operations. They've been taking $5.5 billion to cover up their wars and other adventures. So, what we're here today to do is to say, don't kill the post office, save America's Postal Service.
A Black is Back rally was also held at Malcolm X Park in Washington, D.C. on November 3rd. Speakers at the rally held forth on the hypocritical role of U.S. imperialism in North Africa and clearly delineated how President Obama has continued George W. Bush's implementation of neocon-lib foreign policies and how liberal supporters who once loudly denounced W's heinous crimes barely whimper about Obama's.
These are political prisoners, the existence of which is denied by a U.S. government that postures on the world stage as a messenger of freedom, democracy, sometimes a justification for attacking and occupying other countries and peoples. We must break the silence because we have embraced this false notion of a post-racial America with the election of Barack Obama, which is essentially being used to muffle the cries of the mothers and loved ones of Black men shot down every 36 hours by the police, of thousands of our young people brutalized in children's prisons, of the millions unjustly stopped and frisked, and the thousands sentenced to life without parole while criminal bankers walk free. We must protest the dispossession from the foreclosures caused by the subprime mortgage fraud, which was created by corrupt financial institutions and supported by the U.S. government with the intent of looting the already meager resources of an impoverished Black and Latino communities.
Indefinite detention, drone attacks, aggressive military occupation, torture, illegal sanctions, and suppression of U.S. civil rights have all been expanded under this president's watch and justified as humanitarian aid and necessary tactics in the war on terror. Black is Back gathered for Saturday in the Park to clearly illuminate these facts. Remember the 5th of November, the gunpowder, treason, and plot? I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. A condemnatory poem which alludes to a 17th century plot by Guy Fawkes and English Catholic cohorts to assassinate Protestant King James I of England has been turned upside down in our modern times from its original meaning. In large part due to a wildly popular film produced ironically enough in Great Britain, the opening phrase has come to represent resistance of the masses to elusive rulers who hide in the shadows of an intricate, repressive, and controlling web. The Guy Fawkes mask of V has become a symbol of the anonymity and unity of the human cogs of that machine, so much so that the wearing of masks has been outlawed in populist protests almost everywhere, and mask wearers are subject to arrest. There were several protests haunted by the Remember refrain staged this 5th of November around the world. One such was held in Washington, D.C., the capital of a nation billed as the most powerful on the planet. Calls went out for a mass gathering in D.C. over a month ago with several actions planned. A hurricane hit the East Coast and dampened the event, occupiers in many locations turning their attention to relief efforts. But Occupy DC sallied forth and remembered the 5th of November with actions aimed at the White House and the legal firm which acts as the major lobbyist for the tar sands pipeline. Protesters marched, blocked streets, and arrests were made. It is evident that the citizens who are taking a stand for all Americans, who are trying to awaken the masses to the realities of our nation's policies, both foreign and domestic, are simply not going to stand down. It is a given that the 99er calendar of activism will be full in the coming months, and the 5th of November will come around again. And it is clear that governments who arrest citizens for wearing masks are afraid, as well they should be. For behind those masks there is more than just flesh. Beneath those masks there are ideas, and ideas are bulletproof.
What do we do now? Not what did we do last year? We need to think, what do we do now? What do we next spring? What do we do next year? How do we... And I think that a lot of people are doing that work. That's the beautiful thing about Occupy, is it didn't really disappear. It disappeared from that spectacle, celebratory phenomenon of the mainstream media. Great, so we're out of that news cycle. If that's all we had to offer, then we're certainly not a movement. But if what we have to offer is that the hyper-localization of the Occupy skills, of the analysis, of the learning around power building, and that manifesting in things like Safe in Seattle, or a PUD campaign in Olympia, or a coal port opposition in Bellingham, or, you know, that's just regionally here, but those sorts of things are manifesting all over the place. Then Occupy and the social movement that it was part of beforehand is only strengthened by what happened last fall, and the relationships, the network of relationships that grew, the level of skill and the sophistication and the lessons that were learned. And people will have to get over their disappointment in thinking that the revolution was there and it all was going to shift, and we need to be more mature than that. We need to understand that movement building is a longer term thing, and we're all bound to be disappointed and at different times, but you know, we're required to have courage and resilience, and come from our ground our engagement in a place of sustainability and love and community for the long-term fight.
The jaundiced visions of a world filled with intrigue, cruelty, and opium smoke were first offered to mass consumption by Marco Polo's questionable travelogue, and the contemporary Western tradition of prejudicial attitudes against all things Eastern or foreign can be traced to the account of his travels. The methods employed by Polo's writer, Rustichello of Pisa, a writer of titillating romances who made Polo's brief 36-page travelogue into a 200-page wonderland of racist imagery, have been employed by generations of Western rulers to gain political advantage over Eastern nations or indeed wage unjustifiable wars. The jaundiced images of the Far East have stayed with us until today. The foreboding term, Red China, must be familiar to most in the English-speaking world. But for Wall Street bankers, no such jaundiced or xenophobic considerations could have mattered, judging by their sordid deals following the subprime mortgage crisis in the U.S. After all, the racial or religious-biased claptrap lives on as a means to divide the gullible masses. Otherwise, there would be no bloodletting among the human family and little spending on so-called national defense. The 2007 financial meltdown led to steep declines in house prices, and mortgage delinquencies soared. Securities backed with mortgages, including subprime mortgages, widely held by financial firms, lost most of their value. A series of factors, including policymakers' lack of ability or indeed unwillingness to recognize the increasingly fraudulent role played by financial institutions such as investment banks and hedge funds, paved the way to disaster. Also known as shadow banks, such institutions were able to mask their leverage levels from investors and regulators through the use of complex, off-balance sheet derivatives and securitizations. Stuck with mortgages that essentially had no value, they issued bonds based on the original value of the debts and offloaded the assets to foreign banks and financial institutions. These also became known in other forms as toxic assets. China and Germany became a favorite end customer for such illegal trade due to their massive reserves in U.S. dollars and willingness to buy such securities. So in effect, China and Germany had become the proprietors of homes in the U.S. whose owners had yet to default on their mortgage payments. The Chinese and the European banks are now aggressively attempting to recuperate their losses, and lack of willingness by the private financial system to support lending or so-called rescue packages has thrown millions of American would-be homeowners to the financial wolves. It's make your mind up time for Washington. Either the Japanese, Chinese, Germans, and the rest are bad enough to be derided at every opportunity via the Western corporate mouthpieces, or indeed they are just unwitting junior partners and fall guys in a massive fraud initiated by the 1%'s minions in Wall Street. If the said nations are the latter, then why should xenophobia and prejudice continue to be heaped against them via the rulers' mass media networks? Could it be that the rulers continue to seek to divide the human family with a view for yet more devastating wars and bloodshed?
The question that I always ask, as a career activist, you call yourself, it's the role you've taken
I
up.
don't know if I've used the word career, but yes, what is face? A Punk Patriot called me a professional, an interview with a professional activist, organizer, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever Fox News called you, the executive director of the Backbone
I'm the
campaign.
executive director. Yeah,
So, what do you feel needs to happen to get the larger populace of America out of their houses and into the streets to speak up against the government as it currently stands? Like, how much worse does it have to get?
I don't know that it needs to get worse. I think we need to get better. I think we need to be better. That activism is an inadequate response to the problem that we face. Activism combined with organizing, combined with cultural work, is all part of the work, is a part of the full spectrum of engagement that we have to do as movement builders. Part of that work is giving people a sense of belonging and an experience of community. Part of that work is plugging those leaks in the local economies and providing and doing organizing that makes a material difference in people's lives. It's not just talking about a vision, but it's talking about things and using organizing skills to build power for people to build the alternative economy. So I don't think that it needs to get worse. I think we need to get better. And part of that needs to be, transforming the way we engage. It also is, it's important that we evolve our understanding of the problem. And the challenge is that the escalation of the problem, I fear, is snowballing. Where I can say just half jokingly that Citizens United was a gift to moving something that was esoteric into the mainstream. It also accentuated the pace of the collusion between corporate and elected power that is now threatening the very foundation of even constitutional rights and national sovereignty and anything resembling representation of the people by allowing governments that are bought and paid for at this point to enter into agreements with each other that aren't in favor of the people, the workers, or the environment of those places, but are in favor of a transnational investor class. And that's, I believe, what's happening with the Trans-Pacific Partnership. So as much as we need to work on those very bread and butter, those local things, we also have to have an analysis that's an international analysis about the real scope of the problem.